Hey guys, Merry Christmas Eve. I hope you all are enjoying time with your friends and family and loved ones. I myself am out in Northern California right now visiting my parents and my younger sister. So as you can imagine, we've had a great time doing some wine tasting and spending some good time together. I don't get to see them very often, so it's always a treat. So tonight I wanted to do, in celebration of Christmas, Wino Wednesday number 2, and we're going to continue on with the evaluation of the wine like a certified sommelier to the smell. A couple weeks ago I did sight, and that's kind of just getting started with the evaluation, and smell is where it really gets interesting and fun and kind of creative. So let's get started. So the first thing that you're going to do when you have a wine is, what we learned in the class is that you can keep the stem of the glass on the table. Maybe that's common knowledge, but I don't think that I did that beforehand. And you're just going to swirl the wine and kind of open it up, let the flavors, the aromas, aerate it a little bit. And also, you can, if your wine's too cold, you won't really get the proper smells from it. So if you want to warm it up a little bit, you can do it by your hands. You can just wait a few minutes. Mine's room temperature, so I should be good to go with this one. So you're going to open it up a little bit, and the first thing you're going to look for is if the wine is sound. So if it's bad or if it's good, basically. So you should be able to tell right away if it's a sound wine or if it's unsound. And most of them, hopefully, the wines that you drink will be sound. And if you come across something that's unsound, you'll be able to tell right away, even if you aren't really familiar with wines and evaluating wines, because it'll be kind of a musty smell, or that comes from it being corked maybe, or being over-oxidized. The owner of the wine bar that I work at told me that wines that are over-oxidized remind him of the smell of paint. So if you smell paint in your wine, that's probably not a good thing, and you could have an unsound wine. So the next thing we're going to look for is to smell is the development of the wine. Basically, wine has 3 stages. So you have the developing wines, which are the younger wines. You have the developed wines, which are the ones that they're ready to drink, and they're kind of at the plateau. And then if they're past their peak, it's on the downward side of the plateau. And those will have typically a more vegetal or kind of a musty smell to them. They're not bad. They should have been drank a while ago, but you can still drink them. Some people might even prefer wines that are past their peak. So I prefer a wine that is developed. Some people like the developing, the higher fruit to it. It's all based on personal preference, but any stage of the wine is drinkable, and it's probably good. There's just that one, it could even be a specific year, a specific week. It's kind of just a gamble to see when the wine is at its perfect prime drinking condition. So this one I would say is a developed wine. So the next thing is the fruit versus earth, or also minerality goes with the earth. And this will distinguish whether this is an old world or a new world wine. So this one is fruit to me, and you can smell that if you get, say, a French wine, a nice French wine, and you get a Shiraz from Australia, and you put those side by side and you compare the two, you will easily be able to distinguish the fruit versus the earth minerality. It's very apparent, and the only thing that kind of has thrown me off is that a lot of the California wines will actually be, especially the Napa area wines, some of those wines will be more earthy, which is, that kind of, in a blind taste test, that can kind of throw you off because you expect California wines or, New World wines to be more fruity. But anyways, this is a California wine, and you can definitely get the fruit from it. Yeah, it's definitely fruity. So I would say that this is a new world if I were evaluating this wine in a blind taste test. So the next thing you're going to look at or to smell is the intensity of the wine. And this will also back up your fruit versus earth smells, because the New World wines are typically fruitier than the Old World wines. and they will have a higher attack. This is based on the higher sugar level, and so whenever you smell the wine, and something that I learned, not in class, it was actually in the wine bar, is that whenever you smell a wine, you should smell from the top and not the bottom, because the fruit smells will roll towards the top and the alcohol will roll towards the bottom. And you can tell the difference. So go ahead and give that a try. It's kind of interesting, and it's also helped me in evaluating the wines to get a clear, perspective on the specific fruits that are in the wine, or the specific, earth smells that are in the wine, whatever it may be. Just smell at the top. So, with this one, that has a pretty, I would say that has a medium plus attack. I can smell the wine. I'm not having to stick my nose in the glass to get the scent of it, which sometimes might happen with the old world wines, because they'll be less intense. So I would say this is a medium plus intensity, or you can also call it an attack. It has a high attack, a medium plus attack, and that's just another word for intensity. So then after that, you're going to smell for sugar smells. Typically in a red wine, you won't get this unless it's maybe a port. In white wines, you could get this in a Riesling or a Spätlese or something like that. You'll get the sugar smells, and those will be pretty evident. So then after that is where you go to the fun part, and that's the aromas. And the aromas, you can basically be as creative as you want, as long as you're along the right path. And you'll learn that different varietals have different aroma categories that are associated with them. So, for instance, Sauvignon Blanc, the aroma categories that are associated is grassy or citrusy or grapefruit or something like that. And Riesling will be more tropical fruits, and Cabernet will have more of the stone fruits like the plums, or it'll be blackberry or black currant or something. And then Tempranillos will have a leathery smell to them. And also wines will have a secondary and a primary scent. So the first thing that you smell, you should get about 3 flavors initially when you first smell it, and those will be your primary scents, and then the ones that come behind are the secondary. And maybe give 1 or 2 of the secondary if you're evaluating a wine. So when I smell this, I get, right off the bat, I get blackberry. So that could lead me towards maybe a cab-based wine, something along those lines. So I also get pepper. That's something that's pretty typical in a Syrah or a Zinfandel, is kind of that peppery smell. So, like I said, really the more you learn about the wines and the more you learn about the different varietals, the easier picking out the scents will become. And if you're still having a hard time, they have these kits that we actually had in class that were fantastic. And they have basically the concentrated oils of these different smells that are typical in wine. And you got to go around and, you smelled something and you're like, oh, I know what that is, but I can't quite put my finger on it. And you got to go around and smell the different the different oils, and help you to identify. So, for instance, when I smell a wine now and I smell lindenberry, that was not something that I would have typically picked up until the class, and smelling the different wines and smelling the different oils and putting the 2 and 2 together. So to me, it's a really cool thing about evaluating wines. You can be creative with it. Our running joke in class was kind of that our professor would always say, it wasn't florally, he would smell black African violets. And I think I actually wrote about that because, we just thought it was preposterous at the beginning, actually. But then it's funny because the longer you do it and the more wines you smell and the more creative and comfortable you get, you actually do. You smell the ripe peaches, or, you smell the hibiscus. And so it's kind of a fun aspect of evaluating wines, and it's really helpful if you are a chef, or you can draw on your childhood experiences. So it's one of my favorite parts. So long story short, whenever you smell a wine, you should have 3 primary scents that you get from the nose, And if they translate over into the taste, that's a completely different story, but we'll get to that next week. So the last hint that you're going to look for when evaluating wine by scent is if the wine has wood aging. In the couple, there's different types of woods, but the most common are American and French. And French have, if a wine has been aged in a French oak barrel, it will have more of kind of a spicy, an American will have a coconut or a vanilla. So they're very distinguishable, but people get tricky because, French oak is really expensive, but it adds a lot of complexity to the wine. So you'll have American winemakers who put staves. So maybe every other stave, which is the plank, will be French oak, American oak. Or maybe it will be aged in French oak for 4 months and American oak for 12 months, or something like that. So it does get tricky. But you can kind of guess pretty accurately whenever you're smelling a wine if it's French or American oak, or if it had both of them. And I would say this one isn't quite spicy enough for me to say that this was French oak, so I would say that this was it was aged in American oak. So those are all the conclusions that you will draw, or that you should draw, when evaluating a wine based upon smell. And then we'll kind of tie everything together next week with the taste, and then from there we will draw the initial and final conclusions, and then you will be good to evaluate any wine that is thrown your way. So again, I hope you guys all have a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and I will see you soon. Prost!